Ukraine has made its biggest breakthrough in the south since the war started, forcing Moscow to abandon ground it annexed only days ago.
In Kherson, some men are leaving for fears of being drafted to fight with the Russian army and against their own country.
Rights groups say the death toll in Iran has exceeded 130 as the country's supreme leader blames US and Israel for the unrest. Ukraine has made its biggest breakthrough in the south since the war started, bursting through the front line and rapidly advancing along the Dnipro River. Russia appears to no longer have full control of any of the 4 regions it says it annexed last week. Moscow-backed administration in the Kherson region even confirmed Kyiv troops have advanced dozens of kilometers.
Today, the offensive movement of our army and our defenders continued. There are new liberated settlements in several regions. Fierce fighting continues in many areas of the front, but the prospect of these hostilities remains obvious. More and more occupiers are trying to escape. More and more casualties have been inflicted by the enemy army. And there's a growing understanding that Russia made a mistake by going to war against Ukraine.
In territories Russia says it has annexed from Ukraine, the Kremlin will consult residents on where the international borders will lie. A move fueling uncertainty around the hastily organised drive to formally seize the 4 regions.
Luhansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic are incorporated in the borders set in 2014. Kherson and Zaporizhia will continue to consult with residents of these regions on the borders.
The State Duma, Russia's lower house of parliament, has endorsed the annexation. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was there. He accused the West of emulating Hitler and using Kyiv for its own purposes.
In occupied regions of Ukraine, residents are leaving for fears of being drafted to fight with the Russian army against their own country. Their fight has become more complicated since Russia's so-called annexation. Ukrainian authorities have accused Russia on Monday of restricting Kherson residents from leaving the so-called annexed areas. In search of men aged 13 to 35, occupiers started coming to people's homes in Kherson and other towns. They're not giving out any conscript notes, and they're not speaking of any specific plans, but their main goal is to conduct a census of adult men. Deputy head of the Kherson Regional Council said the occupiers actually blocked the ability for people to exit. Ukrainians in the southern city of Zaporizhia blocked traffic in protest as they were not allowed to come back to Ukrainian cities occupied by Russia because soldiers tell them the ban is in place due to safety concerns.
The director of Ukraine's Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, occupied by Russian troops, has been released, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, known as the IAEA. Ihor Murashov was detained on Friday by a Russian patrol. The head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, welcomed the development, saying Murashov was now with his family. The IAEA has been warning for months of a nuclear accident at the Zaporizhia plant, which is the largest in Europe. Both sides have claimed that the other has launched strikes on the site. Grossi is expected to head to both Ukraine and Russia this week to continue consultations over the area's safety.
Marina Sianikova, the former Russian state TV journalist who publicly protested Putin's war in Ukraine, has been placed on Russia's federal wanted list. Last week, her husband claimed she had escaped her house arrest with her 11-year-old daughter. It is unclear whether Ovsyannikova had fled Russia or not.
The opposition party in Republika Srpska, the Serb entity in Bosnia and Herzegovina political system, is claiming electoral fraud in Sunday's general election. Their candidate, Jelena Trivic, on Monday said the vote count was thoroughly contaminated and is pursuing sample recounts of the ballots.
Svašta dešavalo, zbog toga ćemo mi tražiti da se izborni proces ponovi na nivou cijele Republike Srpske. To je naš konačan cilj. Da bismo došli do toga, morat ćemo tražiti ponovno brojanje na brojnim izbornim mjestima.
The current Bosnian Serb political leader declared victory on Sunday night, which would hand him a third term at the head of the entity. According to early results of the Electoral Commission, Milorad Dodik won 49% of the vote, against 42% for the opposition candidate, Jelena Trivic, after the counting of 82% of polling stations.
Iranians bravely defying a crackdown by security forces, days after authorities allegedly cornered and shot a number of students at a Tehran university. The US says it will impose further sanctions on Iranian officials responsible for the violence. Rights groups have now put the death toll at more than 130.
We're alarmed and appalled by reports of security authorities responding to university students' peaceful protest with violence and mass arrest.
The President of the European Parliament has also expressed her concern. The unrest sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini, a Kurdish Iranian woman who was arrested by morality police last month and died in custody.
The brutal death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini marked a turning point. Colleagues, it is the daughters of Iran who, despite coming under increasing pressure, are leading the push for change. It is the women who are the change makers, supported by so many courageous allies and friends.
Iran's supreme leader has blamed the US and Israel for protests sweeping the country. It's the biggest challenge to his rule for a decade, and he's urged security forces to be ready for more unrest.
Japan on Tuesday condemned North Korea's firing of an intermediate-range ballistic missile over the country for the first time in 5 years, which forced Japanese authorities to issue evacuation notices and suspend trains. The Prime Minister called North Korea's actions outrageous. In response to this situation, I have instructed the government to check for damage caused by falling objects, thoroughly collect and analyze information, and cooperate with related countries. After this, we would like to immediately hold the National Security Council and strive to collect and analyze further information. It was the most significant missile test by North Korea since January, when it fired an intermediate-range missile capable of reaching the US territory of Guam. Japan and South Korea both called security meetings.
The event is not unprecedented, but whenever something like it happens, there's a feeling of a miracle. At Lisbon Zoo, a scimitar oryx calf was born, an animal species that has been listed as extinct in its natural habitat for several years.
The zoo has a very big role, almost as if it were a Noah's Ark. We have males and females here, and we have the chance, after the catastrophe that is the extinction of this animal in its habitat, to have a last hope for this species.
The goal is to choose animals most capable of surviving in the natural habitat and, whenever possible, return them to nature, thus trying to revert the process of extinction in the wild.
We can never forget that, despite being under our care, they are wild animals and need to have these wild behaviours preserved. This is done with environmental enrichment techniques which are fundamental so that later on in the process reintroductions can be made. In other words, take these animals and take them to their habitat. If they're not wild animals, they'll not have the capacity to adapt to this new home that is, in the end, their home.
Today is World Animal Day. According to the International Union for the Preservation of Nature, more than 41,000 species of animals and plants are under threat, or 28% of all existing species. To save animals from extinction, some are turning to cloning. In San Diego, California, United States, a rare species of horse was cloned, and in China, an Arctic wolf was cloned for the first time. But biologists in Lisbon argue these techniques should only be used when reproduction is difficult or impossible.